This is a video for Christians who have begun to wonder about how their faith fits with science. There are a lot of resources out there, and they mostly give you a single point of view. I'm going to try something different here and give you both of the main views of Christian origins. I'm going to try not to favor either view in this presentation. I want this to be a safe place for you to explore, learn, and make up your own mind. This is meant to partner with my other video about what science says about origins. Let's begin. Christians fall into two basic camps. The young Earth view is that the creation was recent and that it happened about 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. The old Earth view is that the creation is about as old as modern science says it is, that is, about 13 to 15 billion years old. There are devoted and sincere believers in both camps. How is it that believers can come to such drastically different conclusions? Before we look at the young Earth and old Earth models, let's discuss briefly the main issues that lead people to come to different conclusions. I refer to these as issues that divide. The first is interpreting the Hebrew word day in Genesis chapter 1. The second is the reliability of radiometric dating. There is disagreement about the meaning of the Hebrew word day in Genesis chapter 1. Yom is the Hebrew word translated as day in English. It can mean a portion of the daylight hours, sunrise to sunset, sunset to sunset, a long period of time, or even a year. The young Earth view is that the Hebrew grammar in Genesis 1 dictates that the world was prepared in 6 24-hour days. The old Earth view is that the Hebrew grammar in Genesis 1 can reasonably be interpreted where these so-called days are actually long periods of time. Another possibility to consider is whether the word day is used figuratively. The second divisive issue is radiometric dating, which is how rocks and fossils are determined by scientists to be of great age. For this method to be used, there has to be a radioactive substance in the rock sample. The basic idea is that the parent radioactive substance decays at a known rate into a daughter substance. So if you determine the ratio between the original substance and the daughter substance, you can estimate the age of the rock. Assumptions are made that must be accurate if radiometric dating is to give a true age. The first is that the radioactive decay rates are predictable and constant. If the rate of decay varies over time, then the age estimate will be wrong. The second assumption is that none of the daughter element was already in the rock. The third assumption is that when the rock cooled, there was no migration of substances. First, let's discuss some important concepts of the young Earth view. Imagine now that you could create a world. What would that world look like? Would there be rivers, waterfalls, valleys, rocks, mountains, trees, and ripe fruit? If so, you would have made a world with the appearance of age. Trees would appear to be many years old. Valleys and waterfalls would seem to have been carved out over time. Mountains would seem weathered and eroded. Everything would appear old, even though it is new. The young Earth model views our world as being made with the appearance of age. The young Earth model discounts radiometric dating for determining the true age of rocks and fossils because the assumptions of radiometric dating are deemed false. The young Earth model also states that the great flood of Noah covered the entire Earth, radically changing the Earth's surface. Most fossils found today are creatures that were buried in this catastrophe. Conditions are rarely favorable for dead creatures to become fossils. The abundance of fossils we find is attributed to the rapid burial of creatures that died in the Great Flood. Let's picture the origin of the Earth chronologically from the young Earth perspective. The first chapter of Genesis details our awesome God powerfully preparing and populating the Earth over 6 24-hour periods. Day 1 deals with light. Day 2, the atmosphere. Day 3, dry land and plants. Day 4, the sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, ocean creatures and birds. Day 6, land animals and humans. At the end of day 6, the earth is completed, filled with life, and has the appearance of age, even though it is new. On the 7th day, God rested from preparing the earth. Mankind multiplied on the earth, but became increasingly corrupt and violent. God decided to destroy the world that was through a universal flood that is discussed in Genesis chapters 6 through 8. Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their wives were saved from this destruction by being in the ark. The flood radically changed the earth. Noah and his family were in the ark around a year. Much happened to the earth during this time. The floodgates of the sky were opened, and the fountains of the great deep also burst open. This flooded the earth from above and below. Lush vegetation and living creatures were rapidly buried and became fossils as they were covered by sediments from the flood. The releasing of large quantities of subterranean water are believed to have destabilized the earth, resulting in earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, continental movement, and the raising of mountains both during and after the flood. The world we now live in is radically different than the world that existed before the flood. Now let's discuss some concepts of the old earth model. When we read the Bible in English, we read a translation. With less than 9,000 Hebrew words in the Old Testament, words often have more than one literal meaning. This is true for the Hebrew word yom, which is translated as day in Genesis 1. The old earth model interprets yom in Genesis chapter 1 as meaning a long period of time. That the 7th day was not mentioned as ending is considered another clue that the days are longer periods of time. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 is not considered a summary, but is about the original creation of all matter and correlates to the Big Bang of science. Days 1 through 6 conclude with the statement, there was evening and there was morning. Evening to morning is not a 24-hour period. The Hebrew day begins when night falls and extends until sunset on the following day. Why does the text not state there was evening and there was sunset? Does Genesis detail the order when the creative days began without telling us when they end? If so, the creative days may overlap. The events of Genesis 1 are in general agreement with the order of events as understood by science. Now let's picture the origin of the earth chronologically from the old earth perspective. Genesis 1:1 states, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The old earth view is that this is the creation of all matter. According to mainstream science, space and matter sprang into existence around 13.8 billion years ago in an event called the Big Bang. Over time, matter spread out and eventually became galaxies, stars, and planets. There are numerous references in the Old Testament of God stretching out the heavens. In verse 2, the perspective changes. Things are now viewed from the surface of the earth. The earth is not yet ready for life, but God is there. The surface is dark and oceans cover it. The earth is wrapped in thick clouds that allow little, if any, light to reach the surface. God causes the blanket of clouds to thin so the atmosphere becomes translucent. Light reaches the earth's surface, and now day and night are discernible from the surface of the earth. This happens on the first period of time, or as we read it, the first day. On the second day, God causes the fog to lift from the oceans to become clouds up in the sky. There is now an expanse between the ocean and the clouds. On day 3, God causes the land to rise above the oceans. He then causes vegetation to grow on the land. On day 4, God changes the atmosphere from translucent to transparent. The sun, moon, and stars are now visible from the surface of the earth. On day 5, God causes life to swarm in the oceans and birds to fly above the earth. On day 6, land creatures and humans are brought forth by God's power. On day 7, God ceases from creating and preparing our world. The work is finished. Is the young earth view right? Is the old earth view right? Certainly there is a correct way to understand Christian origins, and we all want to be right. The main takeaway from Genesis chapter 1 is that our God lovingly prepared a world for us. Beyond understanding that, the most important thing is that we resolve any issues that cause us to doubt our faith. I have tried not to favor one view over the other in this presentation. I wanted this to be a safe place where you could explore both views. Christians need to agree about the gospel. Ideally, we would agree about other things. But in reality, sincere believers disagree about many things. I believe this is an area where good people can see things differently. I hope this presentation has helped you and that you now feel comfortable with one of these models. For others, this is just one step towards resolving the friction you feel about how science and faith fit together. If that is you, I urge you to also view my other presentation about what science teaches about origins. I have attached a list of resources to aid you in your quest. Here are some resources you may find helpful. Many of these organizations also have YouTube channels. Reasons to Believe and Answers in Genesis both have over 1,300 videos on their channel.